Meeting will come to order. I've asked gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, to open us with a prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to be here. Lord, we ask your blessing upon this meeting. Bless this nation. We thank you for the nation that we have. Lord, lead, guide, and direct us in all we do. We ask this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. The meeting will come to order. I note that a quorum is present, that each member has before them copies of the material on our agenda today and at their place in the roster. The bill 2620 is now before the committee for consideration. Without objection, a first reading of the bill will be waived and will be open for amendment at any point. As I frequently talk about the importance of derivatives markets for I frequently talk about the importance of derivatives markets for the managing risk. Today, the committee will take up H.R. 2620 to allow cotton merchants, ginners, shippers the opportunity to trade and craft a new futures contract that better matches the risks they face in the global marketplace. H.R. 2620 would provide flexibility to U.S. futures exchanges on how foreign cotton delivered to foreign ports would be inspected and graded when it is tendered at settlement. To be clear, the language makes no changes to how domestic cotton is inspected and graded. As we pass legislation that allows for a new risk management tool, I would note the committee is mindful of the fact that the existing number 2 contract works well for U.S. cotton industry. As we move forward, the committee will continue to monitor cotton futures markets to understand the impact that any new contract has on U.S. cotton producers and market participants. I want to conclude by thanking Mr. Austin Scott, Mr. David Scott for their work on this issue, both in this Congress and in the last. With that, I yield the ranking member for any remarks he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 2620 will allow us to modernize cotton marketing by giving American-based futures exchanges the ability to use a new tool to handle foreign-grown cotton and foreign delivery points. H.R. 2620 will allow the cotton industry to better hedge against risk, and this is especially important to compete in today's global market. The House passed similar legislation last year by voice vote, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2620 this year. Yield back.
Thank you, Joe. And now recognize the chairman of the Subcommittee of Jurisdiction, Austin Scott, for any comments he might want to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, again, want to lend my voice in support of this important legislation for the creation of a world cotton contract list on U.S. exchanges. Current law, which requires sampling and classing by the USDA of every bale of cotton listed on the U.S. exchange, reflects an antiquated picture of the global cotton market. Market participants need to hedge, and in order for a U.S. exchange to list a cotton contract more suited to the management of these risks, we must update our laws to reflect the modern nature of this marketplace.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now recognize David Scott, the ranking member of the committee. David's the lead sponsor on this bill. David, any remarks?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just want to talk for a few minutes and explain why we really need this bill for our cotton friends and our exchanges. First of all, it's a straightforward bill. It was passed last year on the floor of the House by a voice vote, but unfortunately the Senate ran out of time to take up the measure. Now, our bill, H.R. 2620, will modernize the way in which cotton futures contracts are listed and regulated under the 1916 Cotton Futures Act. But more specifically, as many of you know, the main tool used in the marketplace for hedging cotton is what we call the number 2 contract. And currently, the number 2 contract permits cotton growth within the United States to be delivered at only 5 U.S. cities: Galveston, Texas; Houston, Texas; Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas; Greenville, South Carolina; and Memphis, Tennessee. And under the 1916 Cotton Futures Act, every bale of cotton tendered under a contract listed on a U.S. exchange must be sampled and classed or graded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. However, seeing that cotton now is grown all over the world, our bill targets cotton that is grown and delivered outside of our United States borders. And as I mentioned earlier, because of the fact that only 5 domestic delivery points are listed under the 1916 Cotton Futures Act, there has been much concern that the cotton number 2 contract cannot accurately reflect price movements in foreign markets, and therefore cannot provide an effective risk management tool. Enter our bill. What our bill will do is simply allow U.S.-based futures exchanges flexibility in how they handle foreign-grown cotton and foreign delivery points that will never touch the United States, specifically because the USDA does not have the manpower to deploy personnel all over the world at one time. Our bill will allow cotton grown outside of the United States to be classed by either a U.S. Department of Agriculture testing lab in the United States or an international lab deemed to have comparable U.S. rules and policies. So let me be very clear. Our bill does not change the fact that 100% of all domestically produced and delivered cotton will still be classed by the United States Department of Agriculture. There is absolutely no change here. And furthermore, our bill does not, and I repeat, does not change or alter the cotton number 2 contract. What the bill does is simply allow our U.S.-based futures exchanges the flexibility needed in order to list cotton that will never touch the United States through a world cotton contract. We live in a global marketplace, and it is important that our rules and regulations reflect the modernization that has happened in our global markets since this act was written nearly 100 years ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Does any other member wish to make remarks on this bill? Seeing none, then does any member have an amendment to the bill?
Yes,
Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment. I have a technical amendment that will...
Just let pass out the amendment real quickly. Gentleman be recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment. Go ahead.
Okay. This is just a very simple technical amendment that will do only one thing and add only one word. It will insert the word "and."
All right. Are there questions or comments from anybody on the amendment? Anybody seek recognition? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Pending the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Mr. Peterson?
Chairman, I move that the bill H.R. 2620 as amended be reported favorably to the House with the recommendation that it do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. This is a debatable motion. Any member wish to seek recognition? Seeing none, the question is on the motion offered by the gentleman from Minnesota to favorably report H.R. 2620 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Pending the chair, the ayes have it. The bill H.R. 26 as amended is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. If anybody wishes to file supplemental, minority, or additional dissenting views on H.R. 2620, please do so. Have them submitted to the Council's office, room 1407, by noon on June 19th, 2015. Without objection, the usual instructions are given to staff that consist of making technical, clarifying, or conforming changes as are appropriate without changing the substance of the legislation. Bill H.R. 2647 is now before the committee for consideration. Without objection, a first reading of the bill will be waived and it will be open for amendment at any point. Chair recognizes Mr. Thompson for an amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2647 at the desk.
All right, that's already, that amendment in nature of substitute is already at your desks. Without objection, it will be considered as original text for the purposes of the amendment. The text has already been distributed to each of your folders. Today we're considering H.R. 2647, the Resilient Federal Forests Act of 2015, as amended by the House Committee on Natural Resources. I'd like to thank Chairman Thompson of the Conservation and Forestry Subcommittee for his work on this bill with the House Committee on Natural Resources, as well as our many members on each side of the aisle who serve on both committees. I would also like to recognize Representative Kirkpatrick, who is an original co-sponsor of this bipartisan bill. This legislation is an important step in expediting forest management activities and the National Forest System and Bureau of Land Management to promote healthy, resilient forests and prevent forest fires. Our national forests are facing an epidemic of declining health, which is in direct correlation to policies that have led to a dramatic decrease in the managed acres. The Forest Service has dramatically reduced timber harvest from nearly 13 million board feet in the late 1980s to only 3 million board feet of timber in recent years. Consequently, the number of acres affected by catastrophic wildfire has doubled from around 3 million acres during the record timber harvest to now 6 million acres per year. The loss of forest land could potentially increase as Forest Service staff has identified up to 1/4 of the 193 million acres of forest the National Forest System as wildfire at risk. It's more than 48 million acres. That is not a statistic to take lightly. One of the great successes in recent years has been the creation of collaborative projects. With these projects, all sides and opinions groups focused on wildfire habitat, timbering, the environment, and local stakeholders come together, making sure each voice is heard in order to best manage the forest. However, bureaucratic red tape and legal challenges, usually from a group that refused to come to the table during the formulation of the collaborative project, have brought several collaborative projects to a halt, causing delays that often span multiple years. This bill gives the Forest Service and their collaborative partners the ability to confidently move forward with management activities without the threat of frivolous lawsuits that have paralyzed management of our national forests. This legislation allows the Forest Service to reverse the trend of increasing lengthy and cumbersome NEPA analysis, environmental analysis. Delaying management activities puts forests at risk or more prone to fire. The categorical exclusions afforded in this bill will allow for expedited planning and streamlined projects such as timber sale and restoration projects. This bill in no way negates the NEPA process. In fact, it strengthens support for reforestation and development of wildlife habitat. The bill allows the Forest Service and its collaborative partners the ability to complete projects in a timely manner to protect the resiliency of our national forests and the people who depend on a thriving forest economy. Our national forests are meant to provide timber, oil, natural gas, wildlife habitat, recreational opportunities, and clean drinking water for rural communities across this country. But to do so, they also need proper management to promote the health and vitality of the forest land. I'll ask my colleagues to join me in supporting this common sense legislation. I now recognize the ranking member for any comments he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For some time now, I've been concerned with regulations stemming from lawsuits. Environmental groups have used the court system to twist laws against agriculture, which then leads to policy changes decided by activists and bureaucrats. This sue and settle strategy means a less transparent, less accountable process. So I think that simplifying forest management activities as a means to reduce some of this behavior is a good idea, and I support the bill. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your work and efforts to move this bill forward, and I don't want to hold up the process, but ask for your commitment to work with us further on addressing some areas of concern, like changes to the resource advisory committees and the timeframes and requirements for the Forest Service to do its work that remain of concern to me and some of our members.
Well, I thank the ranking member for working together in a bipartisan fashion. I particularly want to thank your staff and my staff for the work they've done this past week to get us to this point to move this legislation. I think it's a very good bill that, for the most part, every member can support. This is a great step forward in protecting our national forests and those rural communities who depend on health and vitality of our forests. As this bill moves forward, I am happy to continue working together with the ranking member and my friends on the other side of the aisle, or even the folks who aren't my friends on the other side of the aisle, to address the concerns that both our staff have narrowed down to the ones that you've commented on and others that might come up as we work together. But I think we can find workable solutions to move the legislation forward in a bipartisan manner. Chair now recognize Mr. Thompson for any remarks he might have, the chairman of the subcommittee.
Well, thank you, Chairman Conway, for today's markup. As original co-sponsor, I remain in strong support of the Resilient Federal Forest Act. Now, I just wonder if my amendment in the nature of a substitute just reflects the changes to the underlying bill that were accepted in the House Committee on Natural Resources markup during consideration of the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2015. Natural Resource Committee accepted 2 amendments, both by voice vote. Since the inception of the National Forest System in 1905, the fundamental mission of the Forest Service has been to manage our federal forests and grasslands. As a result, the Forest Service has played a critical role in rural America, partnering to produce timber, natural resources, and jobs, while sustainably managing the ecological health of the forests and the surrounding watersheds. National forests have also been extremely successful in creating recreational and educational opportunities for millions of Americans. In short, our national forests are the economic engine for most rural areas, and proper management has provided two prolonged benefits of both economic and ecological health of the regions. However, while effectively managing the nation's national forests broadly is the primary mission of the agency, numerous challenges have grown over the past few decades, which hinder the service's ability to adequately do so. Often, unnecessary and prolonged processes continue to limit the service from effectively managing the national forest system. This also goes along with constant litigation or even the threat of litigation in some cases. The cost of suppressing and fighting wildfires has been a growing challenge in the Forest Service's budget for over the past 15 years. Chief Tidwell mentioned last week while testifying before the Natural Resource Committee that firefighting costs have increased from 16% of the Forest Service's budget in 1995 to approximately half of today's annual budget. As the chairman mentioned earlier, our overall harvest level is considerably lower than the historical average, and it is no coincidence that a lack of harvesting, overall management, and the uptick in wildfires have also occurred during this time frame going back to the early 1990s. This legislation is an earnest attempt to give the Forest Service more authority and much-needed flexibility to deal with these challenges of process, funding, litigation, and necessary timber harvesting, and much-needed management. In my view, this legislation is the next step in the work that this committee did in the 2014 Farm Bill, which also intended to provide such authorities. H.R. 2647 incentivizes rewards and collaborations with the private sector on management activities. It will allow for states and third-party funding of projects. The bill reauthorizes the Resource Advisory Committee, known as RACs, while returning county share of forest receipts for long-term stewardship projects. And expanding on action taken last year in the committee, the legislation also provides common sense categorical exclusions, or CEs, for certain Forest Service projects. To conclude, this is a thoughtful piece of legislation and will do much to help the Forest Service do its job and better manage our national forests. And I certainly urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back.
Chairman Yields, thank you. Any other members of Ms. Lujan Grissom comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had originally declined, but I'd like to thank the chairman, of course, and ranking member, and the chairman of the subcommittee in representing an area that is struck by drought and wildfire and forest management issues that are severe and considerable. I think this bill provides an important opportunity to address those and mitigate effectively, and I appreciate the ranking member identifying that there's a couple areas that need some work, and I've addressed those with the chairman of the subcommittee, and I'm very appreciative of efforts to continue to work so that it's as close to perfect as we can make it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair Lady yields back. Any other member of the committee? Mr. LaMaffa?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I greatly appreciate this effort here, as having to watch 250,000 acres of my district, or a higher number than that, burn last summer, and with California's 4th year of drought, we desperately need tools to expedite the ability to manage forests. The drought is contributed to in those areas by an overgrowth of forest that needs to be managed, needs to be thinned, and it's very damaging to my constituents and my district, and it's actually a much better outcome for the habitat, for the wildlife, for the forest health itself, and of course the economy, that we have tools like this. So I greatly appreciate the effort you and this committee on this bill, so thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Any other member of the committee seek recognition? Seeing none, the bill is now open for amendment. Are there any amendments by any of the members? Seeing none, then I recognize Mr. Peterson for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2647 be approved.
Questions on the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 2647. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Pending the chairs, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of substitute, H.R. 2647 is adopted. Mr. Peterson.
Chairman, I move that the bill H.R. 2647 as amended be reported favorably to the House with recommendation that it do pass.
Questions on the motion in favor of report H.R. 2647 as amended. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say nay.
Pending the chair, the ayes have it. The bill as amended is adopted, and the ayes have it, and the bill as amended is ordered reported favorably to the House. Does any member seek to file supplemental, minority, or additional or dissenting views of H.R. 2647? If so, please have them submitted to Council's office, room 1407, by noon on June 19, 2015. Without objection, the used instructions are given to staff that consist of making such technical, clarifying, and conforming changes as are appropriate without changing the substance of the legislation. Meeting is now adjourned.